Here we are again, folks, back on the endless stairway of sadness for another D-zoned recap. You all know how this works, so let's get right into it. This year's dishonorable mention is DM High. This map looks promising initially, appearing to depict a sort of avant-garde hell. The interesting visuals quickly lose their luster about 5 minutes into the experience when you realize that most of the sectors in this map are tagged with Sector Effect 14, causing most of the level to permanently close around you. One bit of jankiness I didn't spot in my initial playthrough is that some of the lava sectors use Effect 11, which is 20 damaging floor that'll end the level when the player drops below 10% health. So I guess if you get trapped in one of those areas, you kinda have a way out. Between that and this map's small size, it can be easily completed within that 5-minute time limit, but it's still a bit of a mess. I just give this one a miss. This year's honorable mention goes to DM Anomaly. This is a map that really didn't get a fair shake this year for a variety of reasons. As some of you probably guessed from my inconsistent upload schedule in November and December, I got hit pretty hard with burnout this year, and I think it's safe to say that this map got caught in the crossfire between that and the usual Midwestern seasonal sicknesses. After revisiting it, I believe it's more than worthy of a mention here. While there are a few aspects I'm still a bit iffy about, like the Berserk pack being hidden behind a shootable wall and the inability to backtrack, this map does a great job of forcing the player to watch their shots and pay attention to their surroundings. This sort of playstyle is one that wasn't commonly explored by WODs from this time period, with most opting to either arm the player to the teeth or just shower them in shotgun shells. It's quite a unique entry for this series, and one that's certainly worth a look both for its immaculate visuals and gameplay. The fifth worst WOD of 2024 is Polymad2.WOD. Classic Doom WODs typically fall into one of three categories: puzzle WODs, Nintendo hard crusher-laden sadism, or commando-esque power fantasy. This one seems to aim for the latter. By the time you encounter your first monster, you'll have the entirety of Doom's formative arsenal in your back pocket. From there, you meander from one oversized, sparsely detailed room to another, dealing with a very modest monster count. Even the obligatory archvile that the Doom to Doom 2 converter throws in isn't enough to light a fire under this one. The fifth best WOD of 2024 is Hop112.WOD. This is a good example of a stream of consciousness map. While the visuals are competent, they're anything but consistent, with a mixture of marble, hell, Amazon warehouse, and tech textures being used. Thankfully, the author was merciful enough to limit each room to one specific theme, with some attempt at transitioning between them. Despite that strangeness, this map is weirdly polished, with some decently executed secrets and traps scattered throughout. Combat is generally tight and nicely paced. While it's not perfect, it's clear the author of this one paid attention to what id was doing when they were playing through Doom. The fourth worst WOD in 2024 is Office.WOD. This one certainly had ambition, but this is the classic case of the author skipping the learning phase and diving right into their magnum opus. I think we've all been guilty of that at one point or another. This one is sparse on so many levels, between the entire environment being almost comically oversized and devoid of detail, with enemies spread thin throughout the playable section of the map. Most of the enemies aren't even accessible. It looks like the author was attempting to create a monster closet, but didn't know how to do it. The funny thing with this one is that if you squint a little and use a bit of imagination, you can see what the author is going for. It's certainly not a great level, but it has some nostalgic charm to it. The fourth best map of 2024 is Death 2 DM2. This enjoyable little romp forces the player to fight their way through a metal citadel. Their objective? To grab the yellow skull key and make their way back to the entrance. Combat feels very akin to the earlier maps in Doom 2, and the map is held together with consistent, if somewhat monotonic, visual themes. Thankfully, the gray rooms accessible via the map's teleporters give your eyes a brief respite from the overwhelming sea of brown texturing. The highlight of this map for me is the dark, pinky-ridden maze. Good as it is, however, I can't help but feel that the author should have just gone with specters instead, just for funsies. The third worst map of 2024 is Mikes2.WOD, specifically Map 3. Do you like teleporters? Like a lot of teleporters? Teleporters on a checkerboard floor with no clear destination, nor rhyme or reason? If so, give this one a look. You'll probably love it. So this was a bit of a weak year for D-Zoned. While normally it isn't too hard to pick out a handful of truly great and terrible maps, it seems like most of the ones this year were just average. Normally I cap things off with a yearly roundup, but this year I had a bit of a brain fart and recorded a New Year's Eve episode. Thankfully I did, because it made preparing this thing a lot easier. If you've already watched that episode, you'll have a pretty good idea of what I'm about to say next. The third best map of 2024 is RA6.WAD. This one doesn't exactly give you the best first impression, dropping you into a fully bright room. The above average complexity of the room and the darkened slime hallway do offer a glimmer of hope, and for the most part, the map delivers. This map is equal parts tech base and sewer, with the entrance area being a bit of an odd outlier. Monster placement is, for the most part, solid, with a few traps scattered about to make things interesting. The layout is simple and fairly well interconnected, making it very easy to get from point A to point B. My main gripe about this map is its visual inconsistency. I don't know if this is an unfinished prototype that WizardWorks opted to burn to a CD and shit out the door, or if this map is simply released like this, but I wish the version I played was a bit more polished in that department. The second worst WAD of 2024 is Defield II. I think it's safe to say that this is the trippiest map of the year. I think it's supposed to be a deathmatch level with a bunch of arbitrary shapes and lines drawn about, presumably for cover. Unfortunately, it seems like the author's mouse hand slipped a couple times during the mapping process, causing some lines to overlap and, in general, for a bunch of weird things to happen. To be honest, I'm equal parts impressed and surprised at the fact that the node builder didn't explode when the level data was shoved into it, not to mention that the game engine can make any sense of what's going on. One thing I can say in this map's favor is that you can complete it. It's gotta count for something, right? The second best map of 2024 is Marble 1. Well, the name certainly is descriptive. This map drops the player into a green marble castle, brimming with secrets and demon spawn. Visually, this level does a good job maintaining the overall theme without making it too grating. While Death 2 DM2, despite its strong points, tends to flood fill your monitor with a single shade, this one breaks up the copious amounts of green marble with stone and wood textures with some rather nice lighting. Thankfully, the author showed enough restraint to keep the castle's layout tight and navigable, offering a variety of different rooms and locations for the player to explore. While this WAD is undoubtedly above average in terms of real estate, it never, at any point, feels boring or repetitive. While the obvious path through the map has enough weaponry and health for the player to survive, there's also plenty of subtle, hidden passages scattered throughout that the player can and should explore to get valuable resources to make things a bit easier and to unlock helpful shortcuts throughout the castle. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't give this one a 10. Hopefully placing it here on the list makes up for that little indiscretion. I debated for a while whether I should put this one in the dishonorable mention section or to put it in the 5th worst slot. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the worst WAD of the year shouldn't necessarily go to the least competent entry. When you really get down to it, the entries we consider the worst are typically the most scuffed. But behind every single one of them, there's a budding modder who is just trying their best. Anyone who's tinkered with a level editor for any game has made some of these maps, though many of us have the good sense to let them rot on our hard drives. On the flip side, what if there's a map that's competently made, but it contains certain gimmicks that make the map difficult for most people to complete? What if said map also includes a gameplay mod that makes some aspects of the experience so hostile and unfair that it completely negates all of its good points? The number 1 worst map of 2024 is... Dakills.wad. This could have been great. This should have been great. The map has some incredible atmosphere, including the use of ambient sounds thanks to its included dehacked patch, a very early example of someone doing that, might I add. A couple really neat intro and outro maps, a solid premise, a ton of fun little set pieces, and some exquisite examples of early Doom cute. If it would have ended there, this may have been in the top 5 instead of the bottom 5. Let me explain. The first issue with this map is that the only way to get through it is to play it in co-op. If this played a significant role, it would have been fine, if a bit inconvenient. The problem here is that the co-op requirement is so rarely exploited that it's both largely superficial, while still somehow being mandatory. There are only 2 moments that require both players to be present. The author could have set up some single-player switches and used multiplayer flag decorations to block those switches in co-op play, and it would have allowed it to be completable without having to phone a friend. The author clearly knows that the flag exists, given that they opted to flag the yellow key, multiplayer only, for no compelling reason. It's like TNT Map 31, except intentional. That said, at least you could still use idclip at the end of the map to complete it. The other issue is a lot harder to ignore, and that's the real reason the map is here on this list. The true issue with Duck Hills lies solely with the gameplay mod. This level is difficult for all the wrong reasons. Let's start off light with the weapon changes. The rocket launcher turns into the most dangerous flamethrower ever put into a video game. The flames dissipate quickly, as expected, making it a fairly short-range weapon. The problem is that it deals so much splash damage that it only takes a couple face flames for you to self-terminate. That, the weapon's incredibly fast fire rate, and Doom's often wonky auto-aim make this weapon nigh unusable to the player. The plasma rifle fires slowly and shoots a single bolt that moves at a glacial speed. If you do manage to hit somebody with it, which often only happens by accident, it deals enough damage to insta-jib anything. Keep this in mind for later. The BFG is mostly unchanged. The main issue with it now is that since the maximum cell count has been lowered to 20, or 40 if you have the backpack, you might not even be able to fire it. Great. Being more or less limited to weapons 1 through 4 normally wouldn't be too painful, but thanks to the enemy modifications, you'll be cursing the author for this decision. Adding in a shotgunner variant that shoots faster and doesn't drop ammo on death is bad enough, but what about some evil Marine variants that fire the flamethrower, plasma rifle replacement, and BFG? You're practically guaranteed to die to the flamethrower Marine at least once, as if you're in range of his attack, you're gonna get instantly nuked. It's enough to make you question whether the ability to respawn in co-op mode is the true reason for this requirement. The BFG Marine is about what you'd expect. I don't recall them being particularly threatening for the most part. Remember what I said about the plasma rifle being able to insta-jib anything? Well, in normal comp levels, that includes players in God mode. In Vanilla Doom and compatible ports, God mode only protects you against attacks that deal less than 1,000 damage. The new plasma bolt does 4,000! Oh, speaking of God mode, let's just add some insult to injury. The author intentionally packaged in a sprite that causes the original engine to crash if the player enables God mode. Given that this takes the form of an extra wide Doom Guy face sprite, I assume it probably causes the engine to write past the end of the video buffer. It's kind of a dick move to make a gameplay mod like this, then actively prevent the player from being able to use cheats that would help them clear it. Thankfully, this trick doesn't affect DSDA Doom, Woof, and other modern Doom ports, simply causing the display of the status bar to get a little funky. You know, that's a lot of words to say that I'm incredibly disappointed by this WAD. The incomplete version of this level that was included in Dzon showed a ton of promise, and even the final version shows glimpses of true brilliance. The real issue is that the authors seem to be so against the idea of allowing Doom to be Doom that they ultimately sabotage their own product. And it's a damn shame. And now, on a brighter note, the best map of 2024, DM Omen. Oh, that New Year's Eve episode certainly bore fruit, didn't it? While some of the previous entries lacked a coherent visual identity, I can't say the same for this one. The authors describe this as a dark, haunting WAD with much emphasis on horror and the macabre, and they absolutely deliver. When a classic WAD is able to make me paranoid about picking up a rocket launcher, it's clearly doing something right. It's absolutely wild that a map like this existed in 1994 with its absolutely stellar visuals, punchy and challenging combat, and overall sense of cohesion. All things considered, I guess it's not at all surprising that David Bruni ultimately joined Team TNT and has a co-writing credit on the book 3D Game Alchemy. I highly recommend giving this one a try. It holds up surprisingly well even after 30 years. The minor flaws it has are easily overshadowed by just how good the overall package turned out, and I can't express just how glad I am that I was able to wrap up the year with such a fun and well-polished level. And that's a wrap. Huge thanks to everyone watching for all your support and for staying with me on this wild ride through the mid-90s. I hope you all have a safe and happy new year, and I'll see you in 2025.